All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining for this bonus episode of Keeping Karlsson here on a Thursday evening. I'm joined by Kevin Hebert. He's going to share some fun facts with us. Hey, Kevin.
Hey guys.
So, yeah, that's pretty fun, right? I just announced this on our Discord server like an hour ago. We got Josh here, Joe, another Joe. Oh, who's actually Rob, G.I. Joe Storm Shadow Rob. But cool, yeah. I think this will be a pretty fun show. Kevin is a wealth of information, as you all know. All right. So I'm just gonna get ready to start this recording. I don't know why I always like to start the live show first and then set up the recording. But just one. Okay, one quick sec. So that's going. That's going. Record. There. Okay. Cool. So yeah, Kevin, are you good to go, or do you still need a few moments of me
Yeah,
to
just
filibuster here?
sure. Go ahead. Just
Hey,
just
Patty.
2 3 minutes.
So, Patty, you were saying you are have some football game on tonight. I really need to learn about what's going on in other sports so that I know what other people are doing in the world here. I think the coolest thing that I know about football, which is I guess the thing that everybody knows, is that Tom Brady like switched teams and then still won, and it wasn't even like a necessarily good team. That's my understanding of what happened there. And he's like 40 something years old. Is he like the Yager of football? Okay, I don't know if this is good. That's probably not good content. So why did I press play? I don't know. Got excited. So yeah, the plan for today's show is we've been doing a bunch of mock drafts on the Discord, and so Kevin's been like accruing all of the information, and so we're gonna go through some of it and find some interesting tidbits that we can share. But in the meantime, while we're getting ready to start, if anyone has anything in particular they wanted to discuss.
How about you tell the people listening about the cupful and the sign up deadline that's coming soon?
Oh yeah, I could do that. Well, I was gonna do that also on the like when
Ah,
I actually start the
all right.
actual recording.
Look at me trying to tell you how to do your job.
I mean, I wish this was my job, but I mean, I could tell the people here that I'm in this dynasty league, and I'm about to make a waiver claim that I'm pretty interested in. I'm not sure if this is a smart move or not, but someone dropped. You can tell it's a deep league. This name is a lot of people are like, who is this guy? But like Luke Glendening. I don't know if you're aware of this guy. He used to be on Detroit, and now he's been signed by Dallas. And in this league, it counts like a bunch of things, including face-off wins and blocks and hits, like all that good stuff. And Luke Glendening was like top 10 in faceoffs last year. And he had, okay, I'm looking at, let me get this right here. I'm looking at projections, but he had like a ton of blocks. Like for a forward, Luke Glendening had 57 blocks in 54 games, so over a block per game. And he's like well over a hit per game. And this league also has takeaways versus giveaways, and he's also good for that. So I'm gonna make this like waiver claim for. He has a 2-year contract, 1.5 mil per year. Doesn't help at all with offense. I think I think it was a dumb move by the person who dropped him. Don't want to. I know who. I'm not gonna say. I won't say the name, but pretty stoked because I actually got some bad news that that Crosby is injured, and I have Crosby. So I was thinking like, oh no, for my first couple weeks, where are all my faceoff wins going to come from? So in a very sad replacement, I think I'm going to go after Luke
Oh, that's a
Glendening.
big drop.
Yeah, well, only for a week or two. Hopefully, my other players will help
Yeah,
me with offense in the meantime.
yeah, for sure. All right. I think I'm ready. Go ahead. I got the 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 Delta ADP from last year, so we can see who improved and who the
Oh,
people are
interesting.
drafting higher. So
Oh yeah, that'll be a fun one. I guess that some of those will be obvious. Like I have a feeling that Patrick Laine's fallen.
yeah.
Maybe
Yeah,
I
I
guess
mean,
like
of
Brian.
course, it's going to be obvious, but some there's one that you're going to like,
Oh,
which is Thatcher Demko, who improved a lot. So,
oh, okay. We'll see if I caused it. I'm not even like so in love with Thatcher Demko. I just anyway. Okay, that'll be fun to talk about. All right, so let's start the show.
all right,
Yeah, yes. Welcome. Oh wait, let me think for a sec about how should I start the show. Hosted by someone who, oh, I even had a thought before about like that I've got like we've got the data to back up something. Okay, well, I'll just like promote the cupful, I guess. Yay! Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by a guy who's so excited for the Cacouple sign-up registration deadline, which is fast approaching, so much so that we've been doing mock drafts with the Cacouple all week over on our Discord server! I'm your host, Julian Dubrowski, and with me for this fun bonus episode of Keeping Karlsson is a man who has been accumulating all of the data from all of our mock drafts in preparation for the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, and he's here to share with us everything he's learned. It's Kevin Hebert. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Hey, Julian. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really excited to have you here. Kevin's also like just a huge behind-the-scenes contributor to Keeping Karlsson. Like anyone who's been to cacouple.com last year, like looking at all the data of all the teams, like I can tell you a whole bunch of things that Kevin has done. But he's a true hero. But now he's making, I believe it's your podcast debut on our podcast, right? Wow.
It is, yeah.
Okay, well, I'm glad we got to scoop you before some other podcast gets you and all of your great analytics here. But yeah, so basically, the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, like I said at the start, the sign-up deadline is fast approaching, September 13th. Anyone who's listening to this can play in the Cacouple. All you have to do is become a patron of Keeping Karlsson, and we give you a ton of perks, including hanging out on our Discord server. And one of the other perks is registration for the Cacouple, where you start in the bottom tier and you climb your way up all the way to the top. It's a really fun league. We'll be talking about it, I guess, all throughout this episode, because one thing we started doing is the way we're going to be drafting the different divisions in the Cacouple is with these slow drafts on Fantrax, which are a lot of fun because you don't have to schedule a time and you have a lot of time also to like banter between picks. And I really enjoy slow drafts. And so we've been doing a bunch of mock slow drafts, which is a great opportunity for us to get some early data, some early returns. This is like the pre-election results. I know we know how sometimes those work out, but we've got all this data now of how we think these fantasy drafts are going to go. And this is information, I guess, useful for the Cacouple, but maybe also for the listeners. Just in general, you might find it interesting to hear some of these tidbits about who's getting drafted later, earlier than possible, some trends. So Kevin's going to bring it all to us in just a sec. I guess let me mention quickly that we are proudly presented by DobberHockey.com, #1 fantasy hockey website in the world. They've got their guide. You know all about Dobber Hockey if you're successful in fantasy hockey, and if you're not, what are you doing? Check it out, DobberHockey.com. But all right, with that, I guess, Kevin, I'm ready to go. I feel like I'm like the host, but you're kind of the host because you've got all the plan of what we're going to talk about. So why don't you just start with like tidbit number one that you think is interesting from our mock draft so far?
All right, so I got a bunch of guys here who, compared to last year, their ADP has really, they go really earlier than they used to do last year. You know, some of them are really obvious, like Rope Hintz, Trocheck, Garland. They all jump 130 spot ahead of last year. So last year they were around 200 mark. Now they go in the 70s. So that's a big improvement for them. And it means that these guys are probably gonna, if you want them, you're gonna have to go for them earlier than last year. But that's kind of obvious. Some guys who were maybe a little less obvious, you got Martin Necas. I'm not sure on the pronunciation.
Yes, Necas.
Necas, yeah. So he also went up 112 spot. So that's a big improvement for him. So he now goes 114. So if you want to have, this young and exciting guy, I don't know, what do you think he's worth? Would you grab him there, Elon?
So yeah, I think it's really interesting. This is like a general question with your drafts. Like you're talking about players who are, being drafted so much earlier than they were last year. And you have to kind of wonder, like, is that a good strategy to be taking guys who just have this like big surge, like 100 spot improvement? Because obviously something has changed to make people higher on these players. And it could just be that last year, especially a weird season, right? The divisions were different. A bunch of teams had all these COVID postponed games and the schedules were weird. So you have to wonder if maybe it might not be so smart to like put so much weight on last season. And I guess one big way that you'd be putting a lot of weight on last season is to be jumping on players who have really improved in the rankings. So I wonder if in drafts you want to maybe maybe have a threshold. Like I'll take 3 guys who have had a huge improvement from last year, but also play it safe with some other picks. But yeah, I guess with Martin Necas specifically. So he's a guy that, he was only his second year last year in the league. And in his first year, he had 36 points in 64 games. So it was like decent, but, not someone that was like on most fantasy rosters. And last year, he had this huge explosion, right? 41 points in 53 games. So a much better season. I feel like with someone like him, it makes sense because like you're
Yeah,
talking about 1 year leagues also, right? So it's like
correct.
it makes sense that a rookie isn't going to get drafted so high, and then we're going to expect him to do better in his second year. So I think he's not someone I'd be so nervous about reaching on because we would expect
But
that's just the normal career progression.
like another guy that just went, the next guy on the list is Pavel Buchnevich. He also went up 100 spot. Yeah, I'm sorry, 108 spot. So he's now drafted. His ADP is 100 even. So it used to be 208 last year. And I don't know about him because he changed team, and I'm pretty sure he's going to have a harder time in St. Louis to replicate what he did in New York.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I would be nervous if you're saying 100. So who's like around him, just to get a sense of like, let's say after Buchnevich, who's like the next up in the ADP that people could have gotten when they took Pavel instead?
They could have got Bjorkstrand. I know you like him a lot. Pavelski is going at 95. Then we next forward we got Larkin at 105 and Garland at 106.
Right. Yeah. So we're, some of these guys like Bjorkstrand and Larkin, like we were talking like top players on their team that we know they're going to get
Yeah,
like really strong deployment. Buchnevich had this amazing year last year for sure, like 48 points in 54 games, it's a 73-point pace. Before that, his career high was the previous year when he paced for like around 55 points. So it was like this huge explosion. And from everything I read, he was a big part of it. Like it's not as if he was just like riding the coattails of Zibanejad. Like a lot of people are even saying they might be a little bit worried about what Zibanejad could do like without having Buchnevich on his side. But at the same time, yeah, who knows what his role is going to be in St. Louis? Is he going to be playing with a centerman as good as Zibanejad? I
yeah,
definitely would rather take a Bjorkstrand or a Larkin. Pavelski, I guess, is interesting because he is getting older. So at some point, we expect the regression to happen. And last year, if you take out just like the first 10 games of the year, for the rest of the way, his pace is very different than his overall pace. Like we're looking at more like a 60-point guy as opposed to the 70+ point guy. So maybe like Buchnevich and Pavelski, I could see them being similar. And I'll bet you Pavelski, by the way, is also someone I'd imagine who jumped
yeah.
up a
He
crazy
was too.
amount. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He definitely did. Iman is another one that stuck out to me. He jumped 99 spot up to 110.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what to expect from Iman this year with Edmonton. I mean, there was a good discussion in our Discord today or yesterday about Iman. I guess I don't see his role changing that much. He was always like a third wheel guy on a line, so I'm not sure what is the improvement here for him.
Yeah, Hyman is very interesting. So, by the way, people listening, obviously this is a non-standard form of the show. Kevin and I are just chatting here. We're inviting you along for the ride, and so you'll get to hear a non-scripted Keeping Karlsson show as opposed to sometimes when Brian and I have a really strict plan. But I kind of like it. But yeah, you're bringing up Hyman. So I guess the tantalizing thing is like Zach Cassian put up a 47-point pace playing on
Yeah,
McDavid's line in 2019-20. So it's like Zach Cassian, I don't think is like that great of an offensive player. Like
no,
Zach. Yeah, so Zach
agreed.
Hyman. Okay, that's not like too much of a hot
No,
take,
no.
I don't think. It's like Hyman's a guy who's shown, like last year he paced for 63, the year before he paced for 59. Like he's shown that he has some finishing ability. He had 21 goals in 2019-20 and 15 goals in 43 games last year. So it's like almost a 30 goal pace, like 26, 27 goal pace. And yeah, he had good line mates before. Now he might potentially be playing with McDavid or Draisaitl, you'd expect, or who knows, maybe even once in a while. What I'm imagining that I think the most likely scenario, at least to start the year, is like a McDavid, Puljujarvi, and Hyman, and then keep like RNH with Draisaitl and Yamamoto. But I could see any combination. Sometimes they put RNH with the scrubs, and then McDavid and Draisaitl play together. So we'll have to see how that works out. But yeah, the Hyman upside is real. And I think the floor is also nice because he's good for peripherals. They're paying him big money. They signed this like 7-year contract. I know that some people were saying like maybe there's a worst case scenario where Edmonton streams him down to the third line in order to like spread the wealth, but that just seems kind of unlikely
Yeah,
that like that would have to be like a disaster has happened if they need to do that. Hopefully that they've shored up their depth a little bit. So yeah, I understand why he's gone, but at the same time, you say how many spots has he gone up from previous years? Like 100 spots?
Iman was 97 spot in our ADP.
Okay, and how did that compare to where he was drafted in the previous year?
He was drafted 209 and now he's 110.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's
99
wild.
spots. Yeah.
Because he was already coming off a 60-point season in 2019-20, and he basically did the same thing. And last year, his most common line mates I'm seeing here on Frozen Tools were Matthews and Marner. So yeah, playing with McDavid is awesome, but it's not like so much better than playing with Matthews and Marner. Maybe the rub could be that Hyman has the possibility of getting a spot on the top power play, right? Like
Yeah.
it's generally been Alex Chase on there with like the four great forwards, McDavid, Draisaitl, RNH, or sorry, three great forwards. Tyson Barrie will be there. Then there's that fourth spot, which some people were thinking maybe could be Puljujarvi. Like at one point we thought maybe Yamamoto can get it, but it seems like Hyman could take that spot. So that obviously would really raise the ceiling.
And
so,
I think Edmonton runs, two power plays with McDavid and Draisaitl. So even if you don't get on power play one, you're still playing. You have a decent shot at playing with them on the second power play. So
yes, there you go. So he had 5 power play points last year in the 43 games. So you could expect a few more power play points. Yeah, if things break right, he could be like a 65. I mean, he already was a 63-point pace guy last year. So I mean, it seems kind of crazy to say like if things break right, he could be a 70-point guy. I guess it's possible. I get it. I don't know. To me, I'd be a little nervous. I guess this would be like, again, like if I'm taking a big swing on Hyman, then I'm definitely not also taking a swing on Buchnevich and some other players changing teams, because that you're adding a lot of risk to your team because we don't know how well he'll fit in with different players. Maybe he just like can't click with McDavid. What if he can't keep up with McDavid? So they put him on a line. What if they go McDavid, Draisaitl, and Puljujarvi, then have RNH with Yamamoto and Hyman, and then all of a sudden Hyman's like not especially exciting. Like it's not a terrible line to be on, but maybe he becomes like more like a 50-point player. So the upside is there, but no one knows, and no one could just say like, oh no, but I saw a quote from the GM. Like like we'll see on the ice, and like lines change a lot throughout the season. So I think he's a bit of a risky guy in terms of if you're really taking a big reach on him, but the payday could be there.
He's around that range in the draft where there is some risky guy too. So in the ADP, so he's right beside Tarasenko at 107. We got Hyman at 110. We got Dahlin at 111. So they're all pretty. Dahlin is still good and young, but he's not going to have Eichel probably.
Yeah.
So kind of limited upside.
Yeah, Dahlin is a really tricky one because I guess that's a point in the draft where, actually, maybe we could bring this up next. You were talking about tiers before. We were talking about like how there's these different tiers for the different positions that you've been able to sort of tease out. And so Dahlin is someone who, going into last year, Brian and I were like falling over ourselves to say how excited we were for Dahlin. He was one of the players that maybe made us look the worst, like maybe him. Taylor Hall, like all the Buffalo players. But yeah, Dahlin had 56-point pace in 2019-20. Then we expected now to no longer being a teenager. He was like finally 20 years old going into his third year. I really thought the sky was the limit. And then obviously last year was a disaster, and we expect this year to not be too different just because there's even fewer great players. He doesn't even have Reinhart anymore to play with. Probably the best forward on the team is Victor Olofsson, maybe, or Middlestat. Or maybe Dylan Cousins, so not the best situation.
Yeah, they could surprise us, but I don't see them, as good as last year. So I'd take a swing at them at the end of the draft, or I mean, at the end of where I can get Dahlin. Maybe if I don't have anything else, I'll grab them and hope. But he's not going to be my first choice for sure.
Yeah, so maybe can you share like where Dahlin? I'm kind of interested to know like around which other defenseman has he been taken, and like maybe even just the overall number, if you could bring that up, like which number defenseman is he getting drafted at?
Yeah. Let me get just this right here.
All right. And so, while you're bringing that up, I will say that I think the concept of tiers, we've been having this discussion a little bit on the Discord, and someone like tweeted at us at Keeping Karlsson being like drafting with tiers is stupid or something, like, which is like everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I really disagree. I really think this is like a smart strategy where you want to break the different positions into clumps. And we call them tiers, where we just, you sort of have like these 3 defensemen I consider to be the same. I'm like almost like equally happy with any of these 3. So let me just put them in a clump. Then you take like the next group and the next group. And if you have it in groups like that, then like it really helps you when it's time for your next pick in a snake draft. Because if you've got like 5 defensemen in your top tier remaining, and you consider all of them similar, and then if you look at your whatever centers and you see like one center that's like clearly above the next center in the list, then you know like, well, maybe I could just take the center and then I'll wait and probably at least one of those 5 defensemen will still be there for me in my next pick. So I find that to be a really great way to draft. To be honest, like Dom Lucian just recently dropped his spreadsheet, which we're a big fan of, and we're going to get Dom on the show soon to talk to him all about it. And like a big part of it is VORP, like this concept of value over replacement, where you do this calculation of, you can't just compare Cale Makar to Mikko Rantanen, right? You go, oh, well, Rantanen is pacing for 100 points and Makar is pacing for 70 points. So obviously I want Rantanen. Like, you have to compare them to like the relevant defenseman or the relevant forward that you could get, and like how much better is he than a replacement level guy. And that's why Makar might be maybe not as worth as much as Rantanen in a fantasy draft, but obviously a lot closer than it looks by just the total points. And so a lot of people just like do this VORP thing, and that's how they come up with their fantasy rankings, and then just draft the player who has the highest value over replacement, like remaining on the board. I don't really like to do that, to be honest. I'd be curious to get your sense, Kevin. Like, what I'd prefer to do is just have these tiers, and then like maybe I'll take a forward who has a lower value over replacement than a defenseman that's available. If there's a bunch of defensemen, again, like I said, that are all in the same tier, I'm thinking more just strategically about if I know I'm just going to get one of these defensemen, what do I have a better chance of getting? Like one of them in my next pick or one of these forwards?
Yeah, I try to look at the kind of like what you said. I try to look at when is the next drop in quality. So if I can get this great defenseman now or a great forward, and then I can still have a similarly good defenseman later, I'll pick the forward first for sure.
Yeah, of course, the trick is actually being able to predict who's going to be good and who's not. And guys like a Dahlin or like a Hyman, that's where it gets tricky, because some players you could like sort of set your watch to. Like I can tell you right now, Ryan O'Reilly, he's probably going to pace for between 75, 77, like between, let's say, 72 and 78 to give him like a generous range. But I'm not expecting to be surprised by what Ryan O'Reilly is going to do. But I could see Dahlin. Like I'm personally bearish on him. Like I'm not expecting too much, just because you look at the data from last year and you don't see a reason why things should get better unless he really just like beasts out. So all that said, you were gonna answer with Dahlin. Like where is he getting ranked? Like, who are the defensemen around him?
He's currently taken as the 29th defenseman.
That's wild.
And he's getting picked at 113. Hellis are kind of his closest 4 guys to him.
It's interesting.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say these 4 guys are like in what I would call a tier in terms of their ADP, not necessarily skill or points or whatever. Just if I'm only looking at ADPs, these guys are all taken closely together.
I see. Okay. And by the way, ADP is a average draft position, I guess, if we want to get a little glossary going. So I think that it's almost like fascinating. Like if Dahlin is going 29th, like I just said all the reasons why he's not like, or he's potentially risky. But then you're bringing up guys like, well, Provorov also is very risky for this year because Philly's brought in all these guys, like including Ryan Ellis, who you also just brought up, and they have Ristolainen. So we don't even know if Provorov's going to get a power play role anymore.
And Yandel too.
And Yandel. Wow. Yeah. So we have no idea, but there's still like kind of decent guys. Like it's kind of interesting. I think a lot of people feel like you need to grab your defenseman early because your options are going to be like kind of sparse if you wait too long. But like Dahlin at 29th makes me think that, I don't know. I guess you have to kind of look at your rankings and see, but there's like maybe a lot more defense. It's like same with goalies. I find this year, there's like a lot of teams are like going more to 50-50. I feel like there's like a lot of goalies that are like draftable as opposed to other years when there's only 15 starters. I don't know, I'm kind of talking off the hip over here, but I kind of feel like, to me, when you tell me that Dahlin is like ranked as the 29th defenseman, I almost feel like I could probably get him as like my second or third defenseman on my team and not like stress too much about getting too many defensemen in the draft before him, and I could like focus on getting the good skaters.
Yeah, well, there were let me check, didn't get this info real quick. There was 71 defensemen that were drafted at all in all mocks so far.
Yeah.
So
also,
go ahead.
No, sorry, I keep on interrupting. I don't know. Go ahead. You go ahead. I'll edit this.
I lost where I was.
You're saying there were 71 defensemen drafted.
Yeah, but this doesn't mean that all of them get drafted in every draft. I just grabbed all of the results I had. But if we come back to what you said about tiers earlier, if we look at the ADPs, we got the first guy is Makar. He gets drafted around 17, and then we have a gap until the next guy. The next guys are Hedman, Hamilton, Karlsson, and Fox. They all get drafted. There are about 4 spots between them, so they're all pretty close. So Edmund is at 26 and Fox is at 30. So these are all pretty close. Then we have Yossi, Nurse, Barry, Letang, Theodore, and Ekblad, who are all the next tier after that in terms of their ADP only. Again, I'm not here to judge, or not qualified to judge their skill level or fantasy projection or whatever. And then we have the next tier is Chikrin, Jones, and Petrie. So this is the top 14 defensemen who are all drafted in the first 50 pick on average.
Right. So you're saying that's 14 right there. Petrie is a guy who, like, to me seems like a good value pick. Like, let's say if I want to just like kind of wait on D, I'm grabbing the Stamkoses and I'm trying to think of like forwards who are getting taken in like the second and third round potentially. Yeah. Like maybe DeBrincat's probably going earlier. Off the top of my head, let's go Sam Reinhart. I don't know, like, let me take the forwards who I think have really high upside, and if I could still get like Jeff Petrie as like this like late defenseman, this is a guy, especially in the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, like where we give points, half a point for a block, half a point for a shot, so the peripherals are helping. And Petrie, like, Weber's gone, right? So all of a sudden he's like pretty much guaranteed to get the top power play deployment with Montreal. I'm excited about Montreal next year. Maybe not in terms of like the team overall. Like, I don't know if maybe the defense actually takes a hit now with Weber gone, of course. But like, they have like Caulfield, Suzuki, Toffoli. Like, potentially they could like stack up a pretty nice looking top power play with some offensive threats. And Petrie's going to be the one there that he's going to give you the solid floor with peripherals, decent enough for points. Obviously, a lot of the players you said there are really good, but why take a swing on, like, let's say, I don't know, Chris Letang, who you said is like in a tier or two above him. Like, yeah, probably Letang's going to get a lot more points than Petrie, but he also has that injury risk, and also his peripherals aren't as good. So, like, I wonder if you like compare the skater that you can get instead of Letang and then get Petrie a little later on. That doesn't sound so bad to me.
Yeah, for sure. Letang went just between John Tavares and Jack Eichel. I mean, right. Eichel is kind of a risk, but the next one after that would be Matthew Tkachuk.
Right, yes. These are like 70-plus point forwards most likely. Tkachuk's an interesting one because he had a down year, but I think he's probably a pretty safe bet from what he's done in the previous years before that, especially if Calgary goes more towards like Tkachuk, Gaudreau, and Lindholm as the top line, instead of like the typical like Tkachuk having to play on the second line with Backlund and Mangiapane or something. I know last year they went more with like Lindholm and Gaudreau, and then Monahan could be the one that has to languish, without the best line mates. So yeah, I'm really excited about Matthew Tkachuk next year. So yeah, I think that with D, it'll be interesting. Right now, I'm still, percolating as I'm planning, but I'm kind of thinking that I'm going to wait a little bit and try to just get those high floor D, the ones who are going to give me lots of blocks and like decent number of shots. Like, you even brought up Jacob Chikrin, who I'm surprised he wasn't higher, right? Because you brought up Darnell Nurse. You had Darnell Nurse in like that third tier, right? Like with guys like Tyson Barrie. I should have had Roman Josi.
Again. So Nurse. So the second tier was Josi, Nurse, Barrie, and Letang. And the next tier after that would be Theodore, Ekblad, Chikrin, Jones, and Petrie.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say that Chikrin and Nurse, I think we had a question on our Discord recently. Someone asked like who to take between the two of them. And I would say it's like kind of a coin flip. Like, Darnell Nurse had this amazing year last year, but a lot of that is riding on a high shooting percentage. I'm sure he's someone, by the way, from what we were talking about before, of players who have had their ADP skyrocket from the previous year.
Oh yeah, he wasn't there, yeah.
Yeah, so Nurse, like 53-point pace last year, but that was like 16 goals in 56 games with a 10.4 shooting percentage, when the year before he had 2.9 shooting percentage, the year before was like 5. Like, this was like more than double what he generally does. You can't expect that to continue. I would expect him to go back to being like, around a 40-point defense, which is really good, especially for a Nurse because he has all those hits and blocks and shots. So I'm definitely not saying he's like nothing, but that's a pretty high tier. Why take a swing on Nurse? Again, take a good forward get Jacob Chikrin later, if people are like worried that Arizona's not going to have anybody, I'll still take the solid floor of the shots and blocks and hope that someone on Arizona is going to score goals and he'll just be there all the time.
Yeah, they
So
are going to. They might score less than before, but they still are going to do it for sure. So I think
yeah,
he's a pretty good get. If you can get him as your either your first defenseman or your second, you'd be pretty good there. I'm pretty sure.
yeah. I think in general, yeah. So what I was gonna say is like my strategy, I think, would be to like fade D a little bit. I think that you probably could wait a really long time and still get guys who you know are just going to produce for you, as opposed to
Yeah.
forwards. You know, when you're waiting to like the kind of the late part of your draft, you're going for forwards that like you might drop if they don't end up getting a lot of points, as opposed to some defensemen. You know, like even like a Provorov, who you said is like way down around
Mhm.
where Darlene is. Like Provorov will still like get a lot of ice time, get your blocks and shots. So maybe like sort of depend on some like higher floor guys for your peripherals if you didn't like swing on defensemen earlier. But okay,
Yeah.
so
So one last thing on defenseman that I've seen is I've been in most of the mock draft that we did just so I can get the data.
mhm.
And what I've seen is whenever there was a D run, those things happen, like a goalie run where someone takes one and then the next pick takes one, and then you kind of feel like you have to, if you have like FOMO, you have fear of missing out on the next great defenseman. So
Mhm.
you pick one even if it wasn't the best choice, like you mentioned. What I found out is if you actually start, or if the best player for you is a defenseman and you take this guy and then you start the D run, you are usually able to uh, because of the D run, the great skaters are going to fall. So then you with your next pick, you can grab a guy that you could have gotten instead of the defenseman. So now you have both the great defenseman and the good skater that you want. But that for
Oh,
that to happen, you have to have the D run happen. So
right. So if you could try to read the room, yeah, and I
exactly.
guess and I guess another part of that is like let's say the D run has just started. Let's say like two defensemen have gone. It's your pick. Let's say you're like fifth and you're going back the other way in a snake. So
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna make your pick, and then there's gonna be like maybe like 10 picks, and then it's gonna come back to you. Maybe you want to think maybe I should just take that D, continue the run, since then you could like keep that tidal wave going. And the if you have like three forwards that you're interested in, maybe you will be able to get them. So yeah, you have to kind of get the sense. I guess also you could like be in your draft chat, like sort of egging people on, like, oh, like once you've taken the D, you kind of want to encourage everyone else to do
It's
it so that
starting,
your
choo
forwards
choo, the
will.
train is starting.
Yeah, exactly. All
Yeah,
right.
I was able to do that in one of the draft. I got Hamilton at 25, and then Fox at 32, and then I took a forward at my fourth pick, and then Petrie at 60. This made sense because these were the best guy available to me at that point in terms of their ADPs. Because I tried this one, I just used the ADP and didn't check any other strategy. And then I was able to get some great skater later on. I got Ince, O'Reilly, I got Lee, and Radulov, all with later picks, and they all were lower ADPs that they used to go because of that D run. So
Interesting. Okay, yeah, and there's some interesting names there, by the way. There's some players that you need to like circle and remind yourself that these players exist, because I feel like there's some players that just people have completely forgotten about just because they missed a lot of last season. Like you brought up
mm-hmm.
Anders Lee and Radulov. Another one that jumps out to me is Jonathan Taves on Chicago,
Yeah,
who's going to play, and I'm sure he's fallen like crazy in our drafts. And sometimes Jonathan Taves gets picked, and I'm like, oh yeah, because
oh yeah, that guy.
like going into my actual drafts that I care about, I'm going to be using like projections and I'll plan in advance. But like not everyone will do that, right? A lot of people are just kind of doing what I've been doing in my mock drafts, which is, sort people by their average points from last few seasons, kind of browse through it, see
Yeah,
how people did, like, while I'm just chilling, because I'm just doing the mock draft to learn and kind of, and then sometimes, yeah, I've seen like Jonathan Taves go and be like, oh yeah, him. But yeah, like some of
mm-hmm.
these guys, like Anders Lee last year was having a career year. He had 19 points in 27 games for a 58-point pace. I guess he's had one season better than that, but that's when he was playing with John Tavares. Since then, he had fallen to like a 50-point guy. So if Lee is back and healthy, he's, I think, pretty much a lock to be on that top line with Barzal.
Yeah.
And yeah, and
He
Radulov probably
was
is falling even more.
yeah.
And
For Angeles, he was 66 last year in terms of a couple points per game. That's pretty good because then he missed a bunch of times, so he finished the season way lower. But for his ADP of 112, you can get a guy who was 66 last year in points per game. So that's a pretty good value right there.
Yeah, that's a great tidbit. Yeah, I also love guys who take a lot of shots just because our league counts shots, right? Our shots are already worthwhile. They're like zero point 0.5 of a point for a shot, and it's like 3 points for an assist and 4.5 for a goal. So if you take like 3, 4 shots, that's almost like more than half an assist right there in a game. So Lee was averaging 3 shots per game, plus a player who takes a lot of shots. There's always that chance that some of them will
Yeah.
convert to goals. And so he did have a I don't know, 15% shooting percentage looks high, but then you look back at some of the better years of his career, he's had like a 17 and 19% season. Then Tavares left, and then his shooting percentage fell. So that might just be a compliment to Tavares's passing abilities, but still, or maybe it was like power play was better. But yeah, I love a guy who could just give me a lot of shots because you got to get that like floor of fantasy points and possibility of like a multi-goal game all of a sudden could really like help you in a
Yeah, for
given week.
sure. He actually went up a little bit from his ADP of 2021. He was 131 last year, and now he's 128. So
Right.
he actually went a little bit up despite missing this time. But still, at that point of the draft, I'm happy to take the Andrews Lee for sure.
Yeah.
Another guy
Plus,
like another guy like that is Ryan O'Reilly. He also seems to be falling in draft for some reason, despite being a number one center on the playing top power play guy, and still he usually falls. Yeah, so if you can, we always say that you can wait on center, but he's one of those guys that if you miss out on the big name at center, you can grab the O'Reilly for sure.
that's a really good point. Actually, that's an interesting thing to bring up. A lot of people feel, yeah, you don't want to grab too many centers. I find in Yahoo, especially, they just give like multi-position eligibility to everybody. To like no Ryan O'Reilly, I guess is center only, but
Yeah,
I feel like a lot of the other centers do have multiple position, and also it's pretty easy to get your left wings and right wings as opposed to on Fantrax, where it seems like there's like no right wings apparently in the league. So yeah, I think if other people in your league are really like there's a center who is like a little bit better versus a right wing. They're deciding who to pick. Like a lot of people might just choose to take the winger because they're thinking the value of a replacement is higher. But I don't know. Maybe you take the center because there's a lot out there. But you're bringing up a good point that maybe you don't need to grab centers early because you're still going to get someone good like Ryan O'Reilly who's falling. So
yeah.
yeah, you have to figure out
There's
your
usually a
strategy.
few of them that falls in the draft for centers, but still, I'm a big fan of taking the best player regardless of whatever I need on my lineup, because there's always going to be guys going to be dropping, and especially with the same day ads that we have this year in the Cuffle, it's going to be a really fun to fill your lineup the best way you can every day. Even if you have a last minute injury, you can just grab a guy and not worry too much about position.
Yeah, that's a good point. Also, let's say you draft too many centers, you could always afterwards make a trade.
Yeah,
And, obviously, if you're trading Ryan O'Reilly, who's coming off a 79-point pace season, search through your league, find someone who maybe didn't take too many centers. Maybe they have too many left wings, and you could make a deal that works for both of you. But yeah, you might as well in the draft just take like the players you think are going to get you the most points. And then if it turns out, and again, you have to kind of see how it's working out for you. Like it might turn out with the schedule that even if it seems like you have too many centers, it might turn out that a lot of them play on off days and whatever, and you actually are getting most of their games. So you have to kind of play out a bit of the season, or at least like use some roster maximizer tool to kind of see do I have so many of one position that there are days when I'm like leaving players on the bench even though I have active roster spots in other positions. And obviously if that's happening, then you have to fix that problem because you don't want to be in a situation where you're losing games because you have too many centers, not enough left wings.
yeah, for sure. Did you want to go with some guys who fell in their ADPs compared to last year, who were
Yeah, let's
drafted
talk.
lower?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. So first, I'm looking at the list right now, and first name that comes to me, it's not the biggest feller, I guess, or faller, but he's a kind of a big name. It's Brendan Gallagher, who used to be drafted at 160. I'm sorry, he used to be drafted around 80 last year, and now he's 160. So he dropped almost. He dropped 80 places. So and he was 89th in terms of points per game last year, full points per game. So it's a big get if you can get him late, if you think it's gonna do the same as before his injuries last year. I'm assuming he missed time last year because he only played 35 games. So if he can come back to that level, it would be pretty good to get a guy like that for your 160 pick.
Yeah, again, this is the type of player who has that nice floor because he takes a decent number of shots and has. Oh, one sec. Actually, I'm just gonna go close my door for a sec.
No problem.
Or maybe I could just keep talking. I don't know. Okay, let me just take that over. Cody, just quiet. Shh. Okay. Yeah, Gallagher again is another one of these players who has a nice high floor because he takes a decent number of shots. He hits, so he's helping you in some peripherals, even if he's not getting the offense. Oh my god. Shh. My wife isn't home, so she's like just. Okay. One more try. Cody, here, come on the show then. If you're gonna be annoying, then come be a celebrity.
Cody!
Hello. She's very upset right now about something. That's it. Okay. Yeah, Gallagher, another one of those players who has a nice high floor because he shoots a decent amount and he hits. I guess probably one big reason why he's falling so much is because that playoffs, right? Anyone who was drafting him in their playoff pools was really disappointed that he only had 6 points in 22 games. Of course, he was coming off an injury. He didn't seem like he was getting like as big a role because ice time was down. So there's lots of reasons that the playoffs might have hurt people, but also at the same time, I don't think you should read too much into it. And now he's had a whole summer to, get, maybe he wasn't even 100% when he came back. So I don't know the whole story there. We haven't done our beat writer interview with Arpon Basu yet. But yeah, I mean, and also when you think about like line mates, like Gallagher is someone who generally would play with like Tatar and Deneau, which is like, everyone else talked about how that line was like such a great play driving line and all of that. And like not to take away from those guys, but he might actually have similar or better line mates next year, at least in terms of like offensive abilities. Like now they've got Christian Dvorak as a center. So I think, I don't know, Dvorak versus Deneau, maybe they're similar. I don't think it's like a huge downgrade anyways in terms of offensive, potential. And then you got Mike Hoffman potentially playing on the left wing, who's a good finisher. So
yeah, Hoffman is another one of those guys who he used to be taken at 76 and now he's 175. So that's 98 spot that he dropped. So
right.
if he can bounce back with Montreal, he could be really valuable at that spot.
Montreal is a really tricky team to project just because they generally don't have too many high scorers. Now they have it's like kind of seems like it's gonna be a whole new situation because there wasn't Caulfield last year, there wasn't Hoffman, there wasn't Dvorak, so you've got like all these new players, and so that we're gonna have to see how the lines shake out and how people play with each other. But who knows? Maybe it's possible that some of these guys will give you value. And hey, if we're talking about just like players that you're noticing that you could get really late, the nice thing is if you take a swing on Brendan Gallagher super late, if he's not working out. So, oh well, yeah, you drop him, you take a little bit of a lump. I'm sure you'll see some player you could have taken instead and beat yourself up. But, that's just like GMs in the real NHL draft. Like, you can never predict that Nikita Kucherov, well, maybe some people actually could have predicted that he should have been taken in the first round, but that's a whole other story. Okay, yeah, so different, interesting names you're bringing up here. So do you have anyone else you wanted to talk about who was dropped? I know another thing that we wanted to cover before we're done is you looked at Dom Luszczyszyn's projections and you have some names of players who the patrons are drafting, I guess, like higher or lower than Dom's projections, which I think are also interesting to bring up a couple of them.
Yeah, for sure. I can check that out real quick. There was definitely a few of them who we are a lot higher than Dom, and then some that that Dom is higher than us. Well, the patrons on. So let's see if I'll just filter out some of the less interesting there.
Okay, I'll edit this part out. How's everyone in the chat doing? Hope you're enjoying this show. It's fun sometimes to just have like a free-flowing chat. I know sometimes, I guess I've been rambling a little bit at times, but I'm having a blast. I should have grabbed a beer. I was going to, then I forgot to. You're having one. Maybe I'll go grab one right now while you're finding this thing.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay, I'll be back in 1 minute.
No problem.
Oh, maybe I should say, I could put in an ad break here.
Yeah.
So while Kevin is looking up those comparisons with Dom, I'm going to go grab myself a beer. So we'll be back in a sec. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson.
You're such a pro, Elan.
Come on. I'm like squeezing it. I need to get a bigger place sometime. We should like make a patron goal of like if there's a certain number of patrons, then Elon gets a new apartment. All right. Lone Pine IPA.
Nice.
I didn't even know I had this.
Drinking Grolsch Weizen. It's
wheat beer.
Yeah.
Nice. I didn't know that Grolsch was in that game.
Me neither.
How is it?
It's pretty good. It's refreshing after all that. Cheers.
Yeah, apparently Kevin was telling me that he had to like, I guess, negotiate in order to get this time off at home to come on the podcast. So he like cleaned the house today in exchange for getting this like, I guess, hour and a half to talk to me.
Dedication. All right, so I got the numbers here. We're done.
Okay, so here we go. And we're back. We've got our drinks topped up, and we're ready to talk some more about these players who in our slow drafts were getting drafted. I'm ready to talk about some players who in our mock drafts are getting drafted in a place where Dom Lucian, or at least according to his models, would not agree with those picks. Either they should have gone earlier or later. So it'll definitely be interesting to see who some of those players are. Maybe we won't talk about all of them because we're going to have Dom on our show in a couple of weeks. And I want to ask him about some of these players. But in the meantime, yeah, who do you got for us, Kevin?
Well, we can start with a guy we already talked about, Zach Hyman, who goes around 110 in our mock ADP, and Dom's has it as 76 skater. So it's 34 spot higher in Dom's sheet than in our mock draft. So I guess Dom's model liked his recent years a lot more than the patrons does in the mock draft.
Right, yeah. So it'll be fun. It's always fun when we get Dom on the show to ask him if he agrees with his model, because he's like not like a Scott Cullen, whose projections we also like, or Dauber. These people, I think, are like obviously using data to like come up with their projections, but I think they're also using a bit more of their like gut, or they're like looking at the situation and trying to figure it out. Dom is like literally just, he's got a formula and he's like sticking with it. I think the one thing that he puts in himself is like time on ice and these kinds of things, maybe from just trying to figure out what kind of deployment the player is going to get. But, you know, most of the stats he's using is just like rate stats per minute that they've been doing over the past few years, weighted to the most recent years, and then, you know, then plug in like how much ice time, maybe even strength of power play time, then that comes up with the projection. And yeah, it makes sense that Hyman is going to be high, and especially if he maybe even thinks that Hyman could get more. Well, Hyman was already averaging like almost 19 and a half minutes of ice time last year, so maybe though he's like giving him a bit of a power play bump like we discussed. Probably. So yeah, I mean, so yeah, Hyman is I'll be honest, I have got Hyman in my dynasty league, and I'm pretty excited about it right now. I think I talked about this on the podcast when we talked about like the player movement, which feels like years ago, but I guess that was like a month ago or so. But like he, you know, when it was announced that he wasn't going to be re-signed by the Leafs, I was like a bit bummed out. You know, I was like, oh man, this guy. I have him on my dynasty team. Now what am I going to do with him? He's probably going to go to a worse situation. Like he can't get much better than playing with Matthews and Marner. And then all of a sudden he goes to a situation where people are like even maybe more excited about him than they were before. So yeah, but not our patrons in the mock drafts, I guess. So some people, yeah. Also, we've been doing in our Discord these like daily rank. We're doing a lot of stuff, eh? A lot of player rankings. Come be a patron and keeping Karlsson. Hang out in our Discord. You can come see all these random mocks and rankings and everything. But yeah, we've been voting every day for a player, and we're on player I think 93 today. We've just been doing this one player a day throughout the summer, and Hyman has still not been ranked. And a lot of people are starting to say, especially with Dom's projections that came out, that like we're all sleeping on this guy. And so we'll see if he could make it into the top 100 before we stop this exercise. But okay, I guess we've talked a lot about Hyman. So who else is someone?
Next guy, I have Ehlers, who goes at an RDP. He goes at 52, and in Dom's sheet is 23rd. So that's like he's going from the end of the third round to the end of the second round. So it's a pretty big bump here for Ehlers.
Yeah, well, Ehlers is very interesting. We just had a question today on our Discord. Someone was asking, saying like, I think it was they have a 4th overall pick in their draft after keepers or whatever, and they're seeing that they're probably going to want to take one of, and he wrote like Ehlers, Kyle Connor, Wheeler. It was like 3 Jets, and then it's like Sagan was out there and Robertson. And yeah, I suggested that I would probably want Ehlers first out of all these people, or maybe Kyle Connor, though I have a hunch that Connor will get taken first. And like he won't have the option to take Connor. So I was like saying like if Connor's taken, definitely I would take Ehlers. And it's a big debate because on one hand, he's coming off this amazing season, like basically a point per game with a great number of shots, over 3 shots per game last year on average. And all of this was with only 34% of Winnipeg's power play time. So on one hand, some people are still shy. Like they don't want to use a high pick on a guy who doesn't get the top power play time because you get worried about it. And you also maybe look at his line mates and you say, oh, what is he going to play with like Stasny and Dubois or something but I think on the other hand, he did so well last year with similarly like concerning deployment. And what happens if he finally does get that top power play time? Like to me, it's like a guy who has a solid floor and like the sky's the limit. Like this could be a 3rd-round pick that you end up just like laughing about, and he like turns out to be worth like a mid-second round pick, or who even knows what this guy would be able to do if he got top power play time. Maybe he could put up like Blake Wheeler like numbers from a few years ago. When I had my podcast with Murata Tesh, he was like, if you want to get pumped up about Nikolai Ehlers, go back and listen to my podcast with Murata Tesh, because he said that he thinks he's like the best player on the team. He's like so amazing, best 5-on-5 player in the league. I mean, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but he was super high on Ehlers. So yeah, obviously it makes sense that Dom's model likes him because he's been doing really well over this past couple of years. And I think that there's still room for more if he gets that power play role.
Yeah. One last guy in the guys in the section of the guys where we like more, Dom likes more than us. Sorry. Do you want me to redo that one?
Oh, sure. Go for it.
So one more guy in the section of guys that Dom like more than us is Matthew Barzal. So he goes in our ADP at 92, and Dom's as him as the 54th player. So it's about a 38 big difference. Well, I guess Dom's are not big, but he's got the rank, so 38 rank difference.
Right.
So I think it's a bit of what we mentioned earlier, that the centers usually goes much deeper, but still Dom's sheet with the value of a replacement should account for a lot of that. So I guess you just think Barzal is due for a big year.
Yeah, it's again, like with Dom's sheet, I guess this is like kind of a commercial for Dom, but for good reason. It's really good, and you just have to become a member of The Athletic, and you could get Dom's projection sheet, which has both projections and this great spreadsheet where when you're saying Dom's rankings, it's not like his rankings. Like you specifically put in the cupful settings, and then it spits out a ranking with our settings. So it's not as if like he's higher on Barzal, but like he's thinking of a points only league. This is for our settings. And yes, I'm seeing here Dom has him projected around a 70-point pace for next season, which, is pretty much how I see him. So if the patrons, I don't know, you can't disagree. Like he pays for 67 points last year, 72 the year before. He's right around that 70 range. I don't see why. And also don't forget that Barzal, I believe, he started the year strong. He had 14 points his first 13 games. He actually, like, the main reason why he was falling from his previous years, he had a bad end to the year, only 8 points his final 13 games. And keep in mind, we just discussed this earlier tonight, like Anders Lee was injured at the end of the year, and Anders Lee is his most common left winger. So by the end of the season, Barzal was playing with, do you remember who was on his left side? It was Everly on the right. Do you remember who was on the left?
I don't. Sorry, I'm not the fancy yucky robot. So
I'll give you a clue. It's someone that everyone was like, "Why the heck is this?" It was Leo Komarov was playing top line minutes, and I guess that's what Trotz wanted to do. And I mean, the Islanders had a good season, but they didn't go all the way, and I wonder if maybe they could have done better than having Komarov on line one. Obviously, next season they're going to have Anders Lee back. Plus, they've got some more depth, like Parise. Like Parise, even as a shell of his former self, is still probably better than Leo Komarov if they need him to go on the left wing at some point if Anders Lee gets injured again. So, I definitely think that Barzal should be good for around 70 points again. There's always that upside for him to do better just because he's like such a great player. Like it seems like he's limited for being on the Islanders and playing in this system where there's like kind of like there's only so many points he can get, especially at even strength. He only had 8 power play points last year, Barzal. So who knows if like one of these players, like what if Parise or Palmieri, whoever or Wallstrom, like maybe one of the, or Anders Lee, like just being back, like if the power play goes off, that could be an extra like 5-10 points. That all of a sudden brings him close to being a point per game guy. So yeah, if the patrons are letting, it sounds like it's similar to Ryan O'Reilly. It's just like a center, so people just think, and also Barzal doesn't have the most amazing peripherals. But out of curiosity, where's Barzal being drafted in relation to Nicklas Backstrom? Because I see them as kind of similar, like around 70-point players.
I think, well, Barzal is 92. And one tidbit that's interesting for him while I look this up is Barzal is the latest player at 92 who has a single digit variance. So he's all his pick in the 10 draft that we have so far, 10 mock draft, are all between 89 and 96. So he's the last one of those guys who are really consistently picked at the same spot
Interesting.
at 92.
So actually, I would be curious to hear. Like, so can you tell me some players who were being picked above Barzal, just so we could get a sense of like who people are taking when they could have had Matt Barzal.
The next the skater who went before him in the ADP are Taylor All, Kyler Toffoli, Drew Doughty, Zach Marinsky, Jason Robertson, Johnny Gaudreau, and Zach Kopitar.
Okay. Well, Gaudreau and Kopitar, I guess you can't really argue. Though I wonder if maybe Gaudreau is more of a risky guy. But like Taylor Hall, I don't know. Give me Barzal, right? Like I don't even know if Taylor Hall's going to be on the top power play in Boston. So obviously people could be excited about the upside, but there's also like the downside of him just being kind of like a boring 60-ish point guy, which I'm pretty sure is what Fluto Shinzawa was saying in my interview with him about the Bruins. I think he was saying that he sees Hall as like around a 60, 65 point guy. So
yeah, Hall has been all over the place in the mock draft. He's been drafted as early as 51 and as late as 109. So he has a 58 variance. So it's pretty wide, the range on it. So you were asking me about Backstrom, right?
Yeah, but actually, just really quickly, there's like a rumbling happening on your side now. I wonder if maybe you're.
Yeah, it's my dog's playing with something upstairs.
Oh,
stupid dogs. All right, so I'll just give you the. Is it gone? Did it stop?
Yeah, now it's over.
Okay, if not, I'll go check on it. All right, so Matt Barzal went at 92, and Nick Backstrom went 112. So they have a pretty large difference, about 20 something picks. So
yeah, so it's interesting. Like, so these are like some good centers that you could probably rely on for 70 plus points, or at least around 70, that you could wait a long time and get them. So don't sleep on, especially Barzal. I'm pretty into him. Like Backstrom, I guess at some point needs to slow down as Ovi slows down, which I'm hoping won't happen because I'd love for Ovi to break that record. But in the meantime, yeah, Barzal, I think that he could probably do better than he did last year. And obviously, Dom agrees with his spreadsheet. All right, so how about on the other side, players that Dom is less high on than our patrons are?
So we've got, there's two that are kind of normal, I guess. There's Malkin, who Dom has for some reason, Dom has Malkin as the 448th skater. So I guess it has something to do with an injury or something.
Right. Okay. So there's a setting in Dom's spreadsheet of whether you want to include a games played projection or not.
Yeah,
so
that's probably it.
With the games played projection on, I'm just bringing it up here. It looks like Malkin, he's only projecting Malkin for 41 games. So that's the thing. We don't know. And now Crosby, by the way, is injured. We just learned that he's going to miss like maybe a week or two to start the season. So Pittsburgh is going to be limping in with like, I guess, Jeff Carter as the top line center, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, so Malkin's a tricky one, and I guess we'll have to see. When I talked to Jesse Marshall, my impression was like that Malkin isn't going to miss that much time. But I wonder if Dom has gotten like updated information. So I'll have to go and definitely before your drafts, make sure you're up to date on what Malkin is going to do. But he's obviously, if he's going to fall in drafts just because people are worried about him for injury, then classic guy that you could get late, stash on your IR, trust yourself to be good enough at fantasy to, not completely fall out of the playoff picture while you wait. And then all of a sudden mid-season, you're getting this huge upgrade. Just Malkin coming off the bench, ready to help you into your fantasy playoffs. So not too bad. But okay, so who else is out there aside from Malkin?
We got Kane, who's just kind of the same situation. He has him really low because of game projection. Then we have Sam Bennett, he has him as 246th, and we have him as 97th.
Right.
So it's a big difference, probably because he, like you said, Dom's applied models to his past 3 years' performances. So it's probably why he was not so great in Calgary, but now with Florida, he has a really short and really intense performance there. So it's probably not reflected well in Dom's sheet.
Yeah, definitely when we do our show with Dom, that's a player I'm going to want to ask him about. Like, do you believe in your model saying that Sam Bennett's only going to be like a half point per game guy because or less actually that I'm seeing because from what we saw in Florida, his role could be huge. I think a lot of it though comes down to like Florida also is a very deep team. Like I'm just let me bring up their depth chart here. I guess we could say it's all like superstar players. But now that they've brought in Sam Reinhart, we're looking at, you could have Barkov with Verhaeghe and Reinhart, and then you can have then you could have, I guess best case for Bennett is Bennett centering the second line with Huberdeau and like Hornqvist or Owen Tippett. And then, yeah, I guess for center, I guess the main risk to him would be like an Anton Lundell or someone like jumping up. Maybe that's not too likely, but I guess the power play is where there's going to be a lot of competition. So we'll see if Bennett could hold on there. So that's another tricky. That's like another Hyman type of player. Like the upside seems so appealing, but there's obviously that risk because yeah, he had that great run on Florida, but we'll see if he can keep it up for a whole season to be worth like such a high pick. And obviously, according to Dom's spreadsheet, you wouldn't be reaching on Sam Bennett, but obviously some people definitely will because he was like an MVP in your fantasy playoffs if you had him.
Yeah, for sure. Another guy there is Tyler Seguin. He was about 88 in Dom's spreadsheet, and we have him as 53 for his ADP. So that's about a 30 pick difference there. But it's the same deal. You don't know exactly which Tyler Seguin we're going to get now. So we hope it's going to be back to his former superstar self, but we don't know about that.
Yeah, like just to remind people, obviously he missed basically all of last year. He only played 3 games. He did score 2 goals in those 3 games for what it's worth, though he was, I believe, pretty quiet. Or no, he didn't play in the past. So yeah, so he did score 2 goals in those 3 games, at least for what it's worth. But yeah, the season before, in 2019-20, when Seguin presumably wasn't injured, he was not great, right? Only 50 points in 69 games. It's a 59-point pace when he had been like closer to point per game the year before that and the year before that, like, you know, been above a point per game. So it was like a really big fall and he let people down. So that's our most recent memory of him, is first missing a season and before that being a disappointing player who you probably took in like the second or first round in your draft. So yeah, like you say, now he's 29 years old. He's, I guess, back to full health. But at the same time, there is a risk there where he's not, like, Dallas isn't the one-line team that they were for most of the late 2000 teens, where it was basically like Ben, Seguin, and someone. Then eventually like Radulov showed up. But like we would just, keeping Karlsson when we started the show was literally just every week who's playing with Ben and Seguin on the top line, because that's probably someone you want to grab. Now they've got, you know, Pavelski's in, Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz. Like they've got a lot of weapons, so it's not as if like Sagan's going to be getting like a ton of ice time. And like I don't even know if he's guaranteed to get as much power play time as he used to get. So we'll have to he's another guy. Yeah, big upside if he could get back to how he was before. But like there's the injury risk of like, is he the same after missing so much time, and maybe a bit of a deployment risk. I'm not saying that Rick Bowness is going to like bench the guy, but I wonder if maybe his role could be like slightly reduced. So I guess if you're following Dom's model, then you're going to be a little more conservative with Tyler Seguin, but definitely a fun guy to reach for. What do you think of Seguin? Is he someone, Kevin, that you'd be taking in like the 3rd, 4th round if he was still available to you?
I take a swing at him at that price. I think I like him more at the 4th than the 3rd, but I think I go for it. I think it's with my higher pick. I try to get guys with really high floor, and I think Seguin has that. I don't think he can do really a lot worse than about a 60-point pace, and he has his ceiling is pretty much is a lot higher. So
right, that makes sense. Can you share like who are some people whose ADP in our mock drafts are around where Seguin is getting taken? Like the people who are taking Seguin, who could they have taken instead?
They could have gone for Ehlers at 51, Evander Kane at 53. Seguin is also at 53, and then you got Perron, and sorry, there's a real French Canadian way of saying it, and then Besser at 55. So
Okay, yeah. I mean, Brian and I really went in on David Perron and how like we're into him now after like sort of ignoring him for a couple of years. But yeah, I think Sagan is probably a little more exciting than David Perron, though obviously like people who doubt David Perron at this point do so at their own risk. And Brock Besser. Okay, so yeah, Besser also is a guy who like definitely has a high ceiling, but not as sure a thing. So yeah, I think around there, I would agree with the patrons to maybe take a swing on Tyler Sagan at this point. I would take Ehlers first for what it's worth. I know that maybe some people would disagree. That was the exact discussion we were having today on Discord.
Well, they're pretty similar, and both of these guys have low variance, so that means that the people who drafted them always took the guy at the around the same spot. So that's good. You don't want someone who has a high variance. Means you don't know. Maybe you could have gone super early or super late. It means we have less confidence in the ADP at that point.
I see. Let me ask you about another player who is, I don't know, to me like kind of similar to Sagan at this point. Like Philip Forsberg is another guy who missed time with injury. He's actually always missed time with injury. Like he hasn't played a full season. But last year he is like, as opposed to Sagan, like he was actually having one of his best seasons. He had 32 points in 39 games before like ending up missing a lot of the end of the season. Like where is Forsberg getting taken in relation to Tyler Sagan?
So Sagan was 53 and Forsberg is 70. So it's a bit lower. He's right around Couturier and Fiala and Trocheck.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. Forsberg's a tough one.
Yeah, and Fiala, by the way, is also one with really, really low variance. He was always taken between 69 and 75. So at this point in the draft, you're pretty sure he's going to go.
Okay, so yeah, you'll have to decide. I mean, you got to take Fiala just because I invented this really great team name last year, the Fia Last of Us, which I was very proud of. I want to take him in Cupful again just so I could use that same logo I used last year. But I think like Fiala, by the way, just to bring it up, like if you look at his overall season numbers, you're going to be like, he's fine. 40 points in 50 games, 20 goals. So that's like a 66 point pace. It's like actually better than fine. It's like pretty good. But like if you even look deeper, people might not remember, like we talked about in the first couple of weeks of the season, he was taking a ton of shots and nothing was going in for him. So he had this really slow start. He ended the year, his last 28 games, he had 29 points. So he like got hot and was doing great. And I'm sure going into next year, I guess you're saying from this draft, people are like going with Tyler Sagan like a lot earlier than him. Maybe I'm going to eat my words here, but I definitely could see a scenario where Fiala is worth more than a Tyler Sagan. I think he's a lot safer of a pick just because I think Sagan has shown us a potential floor that's a little bit lower, but I think Fiala is like a solid like bet for like 70-ish points. I don't know. I'm really high on Fiala. I also, again, he's another one of these guys who I love the shots on goal. Like he averaged over 3 shots per game last season.
Yeah.
If just a few more of them went in, that could have been.
I also like Fiala because I think I don't have any data to back this up, but I think I remember Minnesota who had not a great power play last year. And I think if Kaprizov and Fiala can really click together on the power play, I think at the beginning they were having trouble. I think by the end they were pretty good, but I think this could play into his having an even better number this year. So I'm also all in on Fiala for sure.
Yeah, it's just like you look at these depth charts on Minnesota. Like his most common line mates last year were like Ryan Hartman and Marcus Johansson. And then that's not great. And then I guess the next highest was a line with Joel Eriksson Ek and Jordan Greenway, which is a little bit better. So hopefully he gets at least that. If Marco Rossi comes in to center one of the top lines, then potentially Fiala gets a better center than like a Marcus Johansson who's not even with the team anymore. What team is Marcus Johansson? I think he went to Seattle, actually. Yeah, so we'll see if Marcus Johansson is ever someone that's worthy of being mentioned on the podcast again, now that he's on the Kraken. But Fiala seems to me like maybe a bit of a steal. It sounds like people are really, using his last year's number to decide, his value. And I really think that the second half is more representative of what he can do than the first half. All right, so I I guess Kevin, we are. This has been fun. Like we could just chat all night here, but probably
For
I need to
sure.
let you go. I was mentioning off air how you had to clean your house in order to have the ability to come and join us on the show here, in order to get this like a time off from your house duties. So you've done an awesome job. It's been really fun chatting with you. Do you have any other fun tidbits you want to share as like a final remark on what you've been learning from these mock drafts?
I've been learning a lot, in the back end side of the things. It's not really related to fantasy per se, but I've built some nice tools that I'm going
Oh,
to be
nice.
using for the actual couple draft. I built myself a live drafter tool that checks the result of the draft live every 15 minutes, and I can see player left ranked by their ADP. So that's pretty awesome too. And I'm definitely going to use that to make all my picks that are waiting for me in the chat room. I see Patty as wants me to make a pick live.
Oh, you okay? Well, why don't you do that then to end the show? Like while you're thinking of your pick here, yeah, I will say Kevin's made this. I think one other really cool tool that you made is at the end of every single mock draft. Since you have all this ADP data, Kevin's able to like show you your team that you drafted and get a sense of like how many of the players that you picked were like reaches versus how many of them were like good picks that went earlier than their ADP. So he's able to kind of like give you a score at the, assuming that we trust the overall ADP as like a smart list, which I think, hey, the patrons of Keeping Karlsson, people who are like supporting a fantasy hockey podcast, I'd imagine are above average in fantasy ability. And so yeah, and then you're able to judge. So it's been fun. I've been seeing people like tagging you and being like, "Hey, Kevin, can you give me my scorecard of how I did
Yeah.
in the draft?"
Yeah,
So,
I've also built a few other stuff that haven't released yet. There is one where you can compare your team to other team that draft at the same spot as you. So other team who draft fifth, you can see all the other teams from the mock who draft fifth, and you can see what kind of player you were able to get versus them.
wow.
It doesn't tell you a whole lot, but it's still fun to see. If I didn't go for the defenseman first, I could have gotten this guy, this type of guy, and there's a lot of similarities too between those when I look at it through this.
Yeah, so if you decide to sign up and play in the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League, you might want to do so soon. Well, the registration deadline is September 13th, so you'll have to do it soon. But another reason will be is then you can take some time to go and scour through all of these tools that Kevin has made and has shared all these like slow draft results. So that you can, otherwise you're going to be drafting against people who are using those tools and you won't have them. And I guess you'll have to just go in blind, but it's definitely useful to be able to, yeah, just get a sense of who's getting drafted where. And like, also, I really like this idea of being able to kind of see like, what kind of team can I get if I draft 6? What kind of team can I get if I draft, 14th? Do you have a preference of where you'd want to pick between first and 14?
I actually ran the number from last year for the Cucuffle. And if I remember correctly, I think it was the fifth spot, had the best percentage of team who made it, who won the championship and who made it to the finals.
Wow.
So that was for 1 year. I'm sorry, that was for the last 3 years of data. So
That's
and
fascinating.
I went back the last 3 years and looked at all the draft. Well, I didn't do it descripted, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's I guess maybe a little counterintuitive because I think a lot of people would think, oh, I want first so I can get McDavid. Of course, last year wasn't as obvious. A lot of people were picking McKinnon over McDavid. I think it was like pretty even. If I go back, I'd have to go back and see our couple drafts. But I remember I definitely saw a bunch of drafts where McKinnon went first, and then it obviously turned out that McDavid was the better choice. Not that you were like so disappointed with McKinnon, but he definitely wasn't a number one. And so this year it feels like number one is the best just because McDavid just seems to be on this other level. But of course, when you're number one, it's a snake draft. So that means your second pick comes later. So if you could really do a good job of nailing that second pick, maybe it is better to be a little bit later. I'm about to start a new keeper league with some of the patrons. And we just did a reveal of what my pick is going to be. It's like a 14 team league and I got 7th. So I'm going to be like out of 14. So I'm going to be like in the middle of every single round of the draft.
Yeah,
and
I think I'm right behind or.
Oh, you're in it, right?
Yeah,
oh yeah.
yeah.
So where are you?
I think I'm 6 or 8. I'm just next to you.
Oh wow. So we're gonna be sniping each other
all
the way through, I guess. But yeah, I'm doing a team with a friend of the podcast, John Reed, and so we were talking about like who we want. We've already like basically like mocked out who we think are the top 6, so that then we can know who we want to start considering at 7. Of course, the big question is if someone's going to like reach for a goalie before us, leaving like maybe one of the top 6 available to me at 7, because I don't think I would go for Vasilevsky, even though he's been so amazing. But I would be too nervous to take a goalie with my first pick. But yeah, then I've also been looking already who I'm going to be able to get at pick number 22. And it's like, it's an interesting decision because you get to that point and you're like, okay, well, I could take like probably still a top defenseman. I could probably get like looking at the couple ADPs at 22nd, you could probably still get like a Dougie Hamilton or a John Karlsson, like maybe not a Makar, but maybe like the next best defenseman. Or you could just take like one of these really great forwards. Like I don't know. I always think of like Gensel as that like classic mid-second round guy that you take, though maybe he's a little less appealing right now if Crosby and Malkin are going to miss time.
Yeah, for this year maybe, yeah, but he's still young, and he has in a keeper league like that. It's going to be interesting to see what's the shift. At what point do we not take the John Carsons and the great guys now for the, it's the classic. Do we go for the win now or the get all the young guys?
Yeah, so I wonder. Like, it'll be interesting to see like, at that pick number 22. I'll just talk with you, whatever. Like, it's not as if I can like influence you one way or the other, and probably all the people are smart. But like, I'm thinking like, yeah, for some of these older players, you've got your Marchands, like Ovechkin, like Crosby. Like, you'd think like, yeah, some people are drafting in terms of a keeper league. Maybe they're gonna let these guys fall, and I wonder if like one of these real star players is gonna fall to me all the way down to 22. And if they do you take them, right? Or do you just like take a younger player who's going to help you for longer, even if maybe their upside isn't as high for next season? Because like Marchand and Crosby like are, and Ovi, they're all in like great shape, but they're all like mid 30s. Like Marchand's 33, I think Crosby's like 34, and Ovi's like 36 or 37. So they're not going to be around forever.
For sure, it's going to be interesting. I can't wait to see it. It's going to be a real heavyweight league. There's a lot of great names, a lot of friends of the podcast, and it's going to be a real fun.
Yeah. Okay. Not to make people jealous, because don't worry, because if you're listening, like I want to be in that league. Like we got a league for you. It's called the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League. We want to get you in there because if you're in, we've been like, we shared the people who are in tier 2, like who their division is. Tier 1's already known for a while since last year, but tier 2, there's like 28 people, and we split them into 14 and 14. And all the people in the tier 2 chats that we started are being like, oh my god, I'm playing against all of these tough players. And yeah, so once you climb your way up the couple, you're going to be in some really tough leagues. There's a decent chance, Kevin. I'm not like, it's never happened to me. I thought it would maybe happen last year, and I'm scared of it happening this year. Like all the people in tier 1 of the couple are so good. Like I could come last, and I've never even like missed. I can't even remember a time I've missed the playoffs in a fantasy league, and now like there's a really strong possibility that I could come at the bottom, and I think it'll be like a very interesting. It's almost like not an experience I want, but I'm kind of curious to see like how I would handle that as a person, like someone who's used to winning, to then come last. It's like when I went to grad school, I got really good grades in undergrad, and I went to this school, Carleton University, which isn't a bad school, but maybe not like the toughest school out there, as opposed to some of my like friends went to like Waterloo for computer science, and like it was like a lot tougher. But anyways, then I went to UBC for grad school, and all of a sudden I went from being like at the top of my class to being like just like average at best, and it was weird, and I feel like that's gonna be coming to me soon in the cupful. So anyway, if you're listening to this, if you're not registered yet, regardless if you played last year or if you didn't, you need to register, okay? So go to cupful.com, kkupfl.com. It's linked in the show notes. You get all the information, and then you register, then you're in, and then you win your league next year. Last year, the people who were in tier 6, the winners, we bumped all the way up to tier 3 this year. So you could like climb quickly if you're successful. The people who win tier 3 this year are going to be in tier 1 next year. So it doesn't take long to climb your way up if you do well. And even if you don't do well, I think you're going to have a lot of fun. And a lot of it will come from some of Kevin's cool tools that he'll be sharing at couple.com and with the patrons all throughout the year. So anyways, that's enough of that. Kevin, before we go, is there anything you want to point people towards? Is there any like, I don't know, social media or something you want to share?
No, I don't have anything to plug. I'm just happy to be part of the Keeping Karlsson community and enjoying my time on Discord with all the other amazing patrons.
You're the best, Kevin. Okay, well, we're really lucky to have you. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening. I guess I'll cue the outro music. I'll read you the credits, which normally Brian does, but I'll do my best here. So let's see if I can do this all in one take off the top of my head. So the Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron. No, I already blew it. The Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast is presented by Dobber Hockey, supported by our patrons, logo art by BrandsonWeeb.com, and outro music by Pat Roach, who I'm going to be going to visit this weekend. So I'm excited. I'm going to go hang out with Pat Roach. Maybe I'll ask him if he wants to update our music. But I think it's pretty good how it is. So why change something that's good? Thanks to our super supporters on Patreon, Christopher, Josh, who's in the chat here today, by the way, Tom, Derek, Rob, and Patty, who's also in the chat. We really appreciate our super supporters. And this episode was researched. Should I say that? I don't know. It was researched by Kevin, who looked at all the data from the mock drafts. It was researched by our patrons who participated in the mock drafts. So yeah, anyway, Brian and I are going to be back at you with one of our yearly traditions, the Schmore Goalies Board episode, where Brian and I are going to put all of the goalies into tiers. And that's going to be coming out this weekend. So I guess Monday morning for those of you who aren't watching live. So make sure to be subscribed to us on, Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever. Get Schmore Goalies Board, get all of our great content. And until then, just remember to try to make it that fantasy hockey is for everyone. There we go.
Yeah.
So fun. That was a good show.
Nice. Yeah, it was good. I wasn't as prepared as I wanted to be, but I think it flew by and it was pretty fluid. I like it.
Yeah. And with the magic of editing, all the times where you're looking stuff up, I'll be able to cut that out and it'll sound great.
For sure.
All right, yeah. Thanks to people for joining. It's really cool that you came last minute. Hope you had a good time. Make sure to give Kevin lots of love in the Discord for his great performance and his rookie season on the podcast. What would you call it? Your rookie.
My debut.
Your debut. Yeah, obviously. That's what I was thinking. Cool. All right. Have a good night.
Yeah,
say hi to Emily.
Yeah, I will. How do you know that? Oh, yeah, it's right there. Yeah.